Okay, we are in Hilchos Shabbos. We're up to siman pei. So these are the whole beginning. Most of it, besides the first two or three sifim, we've already done, and therefore, it should be relatively easy. So he starts off like this. First of all, he gives a little introduction. So we'll just say the introduction first. And the Kitzur says like this: Ikar amlachis shenesru lanu la'aseisim b'Shabbos kfar neida. The Reiv b'nei Yisrael. Most of the malachis that are asur to do on Shabbos is basically well known. So we're only going to go through things that are not so as well known. That's what the Kitzur says. What we'll try to do, as we've already done, is we try to we try to include other stuff as well. So some of it we already spent the last 20 shiurim or something, 19 shiurim doing that. So we don't have to go through all those in detail, but we'll touch on them as we go, and the ones that we didn't learn because they weren't the same topic, we'll go through them as well. So Sif Aleph. You're not allowed to use a candle for anything that demands a lot of attention, a lot of precise attention.
You are not.
Okay. So number one, he said like this: anything that needs a lot of attention, you shouldn't be using a candle for. Now, what's the reason why? So he explains right away. He says, and Alter Rebbe says, so it's interesting, the difference over here, what they say, by the way. The Kitzur says, davar shetzarach iyum ktsas, anything that needs attention, anything that needs a little bit of focus. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't say that. The Alter Rebbe says, iyun harbe, anything that needs like very precise attention. So therefore, it's a much higher threshold. So you could use light to look at most things. It's not going to end well. What does what mean? Oh, so let's see. Let's go through it and then you'll see it'll become clear. If you have any questions, let's see. The Gazur Rabbanon, the Rabbanon made a Gzeda. So again, this whole thing is only made the Rabbanon. What's the whole Gzeda? The Gzeda is like this. Okay. Okay, not like this. So the problem is, he says it's Issa Rabbanon. What's the Issa Rabbanon? Gzeda Rabbanon. Shema Yishkach. You might forget while it's Shabbos, the Yata es haner, and you're going to tilt the candle lekarev es hashemen el apsila, to make the oil draw closer to the wick, to make the fire bigger. V'yischayim mushum mavir, and then you're going to be over on the Isur Daraisa of making a fire. Now, this does not matter, by the way, where the flame is. It could be very high up. So just to give us a little clarity what we're talking about here, because it's going to help us understand the flow. We're talking about olden day candles. Olden day candles were not candles. They were bowls that had oil inside, like a menorah, right? We called it a menorah many times. And it had basically oil inside of it and a wick. So what happens if it didn't have a lot of light? So what do you do? Like now, if it's Hanukkah by these public menorah, what do? You pull the wick up a little bit, you add a little bit, pour a little bit more water, you tilt it, whatever. You do something to make the flame bigger. So over here, the chash is if you're using an oil lamp, right? Some sort of bowl that has oil inside of it, and it's not giving you enough light for what you need. So if you're reading something very small, if you're trying to see something very nuanced, you're going to end up trying to make the flame bigger, which is an Isur Deraisa of making the fire. So therefore, we make a Gzeda that you shouldn't do that. Whoever is not yet looking and joining us inside the Kitzur, now would be a great time. Okay, so the problem is over here that it's a Gzeda where it's going to lead to, but it's only or specifically referring to this type of candle. Okay, therefore, and by the way, there's a story in the Gemara with the Tana that thought, why are we making such a Gzeda? It's so silly. And then the next Shabbat, well, there's machlekes if he actually did it or he was about to, but then he said, oh, now I realize that it's a real thing. Exactly. So fine. But therefore, because the whole thing is a Gzeda, that a person might end up tilting it in a way and becoming a problem. So what ends up happening is that if you have two people that are reading from the same thing, then they each guard each other. Yeah, the whole problem is you might go and grab it, but if someone's next to you and you're both reading from the same thing, then you're okay. If one person will try to make the light bigger, your friend will right away remind you. So you could also ask someone, by the way, according to the poskim, they say that for those that were concerned for this particular situation, you can ask someone to remind you. By the way, I want to read this book. If you see that I'm getting, about to touch the light, just remind me that it's Shabbos or something like that, and that would remind you right away. That's enough of something to remind you, and that's why. By the way, if you remember, we spoke about Ma'iravis. Anyone remember Ma'iravis about the night of Yom Tov? We spoke about Ma'iravis. If you don't do it, if it's out. So Ma'iravis, we said it was a poem that people do, and we said that the first night of Pesach is the only one. If you miss it, you don't do it again the second night because the second night has to do with Sfiras Omer. But the point is that over there, the reason why we don't. What was the reason why we don't do it Friday night? Yeah, on regular Shabbos. If it's a Yom Tov, why don't you do it? What? No. Besides for Pesach, in general, why on Yom Tov won't you do it Friday night? For this is the reason. Because you're not familiar with the words, so they made Xeda that you might end up going and trying to adjust the what do you call it, the candle. So therefore they said you shouldn't do it. So that's where it comes from. It comes from here. So it was a real thing back in the day. Now he continues and he says like this, but Neirei Shalanu, our candles are what we call candles. They're not this lamp. And therefore, it's a regular candle, what's wrapped around it. And you have a stick. So then it's not a problem. And Alter Rebbe adds if it's the Eisa Tzorech to do something very fine by it. Because over here, you're not going to do anything. You could be Makel because B'chal, some people are Makel in general. And therefore, over here, what's the issue? Over here, Adrabah, if you take a candle and you tilt it, what happens? It's not as good of a candle. When the candle to burn the best is when it's sitting nicely in a specific place. As soon as you start moving it around or whatever, it actually gets worse. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, so it's not a problem. Now, he still says Le'esat Tzorech, only if you need, because we're still afraid if your mom is reading something so so fine, you might end up doing other stuff, like you could take off the little soot on the tip of it, which also makes it bigger. So we still have, I guess you could say some chashis, and therefore he says only in those situations if you have a need. But fine. But for us, we'll see we're even more lenient nowadays. Now, and this the Alter Rebbe doesn't mention. He says, the Kitzur says, if you want to do it, you should make some sort of siman that you don't end up doing it. But again, the Alter Rebbe doesn't mention because the Alter Rebbe also says that it's only the Eisat Tzorech, which means that you're already in a situation where you kind of need it, and therefore maybe that's the reason why it's a little bit more lenient. So I'm just trying to see my battery's on because it looks like it's dying, but okay, whatever. Fine. So now he continues and says, Rambam have the Isur Deraisa. According to the Rambam, taking off the soot on the tip of a candle is an Isur Deraisa. Now you have to remember, I don't know if we gave this introduction properly, but Shabbos, but the way it works is the only time that you're really Isur, according to everyone, if it's a Melechas Machshavas. Yeah, what does it mean Melechas Machshavas? Remember the Gemara? No, so it doesn't mean no. That's something else. That's between a shegig and a mason. Melachas machshavas means that it's a productive malacha. Productive malacha means you're not destroying something, you're gaining something from the malacha directly. So usually if you're taking off something, it's not a big deal. So if you're taking off the coal, the soot at the tip of the candle, then why is that melachas machshavas? No, it is because the way they would make it bigger. So there were two things. They wanted that soot to make things. Ink, I think they would do, or dye or stuff. So they wanted it. They actually wanted it. It was a productive malacha. And at the same time, it would also make the fire bigger. So that's why it says, according to the Rambam, it's an Isur Deraisa. There are opinions that would say that it's lav dafka. You're just removing something. You're not actually doing a malachas machshavas. You're not making the fire bigger. You're removing something. But over here, according to the Rambam, because you want that pecham, you actually do want it for something, so therefore it becomes the Isur Deraisa. Which is why, according to the Rambam, it would be asur completely. Now, let's just, before I take a question, so according to us, 1 second, I just want to see what's happening on my battery. Oh, 4%. Okay. Hopefully it'll last. So according to us, when we have electric lights, we don't have this concern. Because what would happen for an electric light? Electric light, if I want to turn on more lights or make it bigger, that's not the chashash. The chashash in the Gemara was never that you're going to add more fuel. The chashash in the Gemara was that you're going to tilt it. That means it was existing. That's not how electricity works. Electricity works that you're going to make right. So there might be, according to some, the ones that you could turn the dial a little bit and make it a little bit bigger or smaller. So that there might be room for concern. Not different than a crockpot. A crockpot, because you mentioned this a little bit last time we looked at this. Also, a crockpot, every time you click it, it goes on a different, completely different There's a word for it, I forgot. Yeah, but in other words, it doesn't go it's not like you gave it a little bit more flow. It clicks off and then back on to a higher thing, and then off and then on to the highest. You're not gradually turning. You're not gradually turning it. So, but sometimes, that's not exactly how it works, but something along those lines. But when it comes to a light, there are some lights that as you gradually do it, it could be adding a little bit more electricity. So for those, there are some people that would be a little strict in that situation. But your average electric light, we're not. One second. But your average electric light, we're not concerned to read or do small things by it because we're not worried that you're going to turn on more lights or things like that. That was never what the Gemara had an issue with. If you do have those that you could gradually turn it higher, so some people would put some sort of siman, they'll cover it like what we do for the regular lights. So some people will do that to cover the handle or something like that specifically. So our lights would not be an issue. Now, what about the neronim? So neronim, those are the little candles that they melt in the cup. Yeah, your mother lights it. Some people use it for Shabbos. So it melt. No, not tea lights. The neronim specifically, where they melt into it. Truth is, tea lights might end up being the same thing because they do melt. That's true. So tea lights might be similar. So some say that might actually be the same. So that's true. So if you only have, let's say you have a dark hotel room, and you have a light there. So if it's in Kippur and you have, let's say the regular 24 hours, 48-hour candles, I don't think you have a concern because again, tilting it won't help it. It's just, even though there is a top layer that becomes moist, but most of it is still a solid candle. So you'd probably ruin it by doing that. The wax, but these neronim or maybe the tea lights, you shouldn't read something too small next to it, or at least ask someone to remind you not to touch it. Because then you do have this concern. So if you have the light on besides, then maybe you can get away with it. You should be careful in those situations. But the general candles and lights, we don't have a concern. Yeah, one second, he was waiting.
What's
it means like the soot or the wick. It's when you cut off the tip of the burnt part, the charred part of the wick. I don't know, there's a word for it. The burnt part, yeah, because they would use it. In other words, again, if you're just cutting it off to get rid of it, then it's not an issur deraisa according to some people. But because you want it, that's called the lechus Shabbos. You want it because they would make like a dye out of it or something. They would use it for like ink. So the pechem. The pechem is the part you're going to take off. The psila is the wick. But on the wick, there was also, you're not just getting rid of the garbage. No, you actually want it. So because of that, it becomes issur deraisa, according to the Rambam. And probably most people actually, yeah. Few. Okay, start with one.
In the light that we're saying that as you turn the knob, it gradually gets lighter or whatever, what would it mean that we're going to be stringent in that case? Meaning we're going to see paint such light on Shabbos, you're going to have to cover the...
No, so cover it, first of all, with a siman. Ask someone to remind you that it's Shabbos, if you're reading there. Or, yeah, basically.